I lay in bed, eyes wide open, listening to the sound of rain tapping against the window. It wasn't the rain that kept me awake, but the fragments of a conversation I'd overheard earlier that evening. Snippets from Orson and Gabrielle's hushed exchange echoed in my mind, talk of an unaffordable house, vague financial troubles, and words laced with something far more dangerous than simple stress. Inside the suitcase I had brought with me were $300,000, a sum I had inherited from my old friend Alice. I had planned to tell my son about it in the morning, during a warm, intimate breakfast. But now, doubt crept into every corner of my thoughts. A part of me, that same instinct that once helped me catch students cheating no matter how clever they were, told me to wait, to watch, to hold back the card in my hand until I knew who I was playing with. Outside, the rain whispered its lullaby, rhythmic and melancholy. I tried to let the sound soothe the storm in my head. Somewhere in the house, a door slammed. Raised voices filtered faintly through the walls. I couldn't make out the words, but it was clear. Orson and Gabrielle were arguing. I turned over and pulled the blanket up to my chin. Tomorrow, I promised myself. Tomorrow, I'll listen more carefully. I'll pay attention. By the end of the day, I'll know the truth behind this picture-perfect family. The next morning began with the smell of coffee and an overly elaborate breakfast. Gabrielle was the very picture of hospitality. Homemade waffles, fresh strawberries, a neatly plated bowl of yogurt with flax seeds. She asked me about my plans for the day. Her smile far too wide, her kindness just a bit too polished. I smiled politely, noting the way her demeanor shifted so easily. Cool and distant one moment, overly warm the next. "I've got a meeting with a client," she said, dabbing her mouth with a napkin. "If you don't mind, I'll leave you and Orson to enjoy the morning." "Of course, dear," I nodded. "Orson and I will have a lovely time." Orson looked up from his tablet. "I can reschedule a couple of meetings and take you around the city, Mom. A lot has changed since you were last here." I patted his hand. "No need, sweetheart. I know you're busy. I'll just rest after the long trip yesterday." Gabrielle left around 9, trailing expensive perfume and a vague promise to return, not too late. Orson retreated to his home office, and I, left alone in the sprawling house, began my quiet little exploration. The ground floor was beautifully decorated, elegant, stylish, but cold. I stopped in front of family photos, brushed my fingers across the spines of books lining the shelves. Most were coffee table hardcovers. Gifts, perhaps. Few looked red. Orson's old music collection had vanished, replaced with a sleek speaker system and preloaded playlists lacking any real soul. By noon, Orson came down looking exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, shoulders slumped. "Work's been crazy lately," he muttered, pouring himself a coffee. "New project, new headaches." "That's all right, darling." I helped him prepare a quick sandwich. "I don't expect you to entertain me all day." He talked through lunch. About the company, a recent promotion, ambitious future plans. I listened, nodded at the right moments, smiled when he looked my way. But I couldn't shake the feeling he was carefully steering the conversation away from finances. "Gabby's trying so hard," he said, unprompted. "She started an interior design business. Big ideas, great vision." I hid a sigh. "You never mentioned that to me." "About a year ago," Orson said, forcing a smile. "Still early stages. No clients yet. You know how it is. These things take investment and time." "And money," I thought. Perhaps that's what this was all about. I made a mental note. Then, as casually as I could, I asked, "By the way, I was thinking of visiting the bank tomorrow. Is there a branch nearby?" Orson tensed slightly. "What for?" "Oh, just to check on some accounts." "Nothing urgent." I waved it off. "No need to go out of your way." "There's one downtown," he said slowly. "I can drive you if you want." "No need," I smiled. "A taxi will do. I wouldn't want to interfere with your schedule." After lunch, he returned to work. I continued exploring, with clearer eyes now, and a gut that told me something in this home wasn't right. That evening, I couldn't sleep. There was something hollow in the way Gabrielle had smiled at me during dinner. Something rehearsed. I'd seen that look before. In PTA meetings, in my years teaching literature, on the faces of parents who came to charm their way out of uncomfortable truths. Gabrielle passed me the salad bowl with manicured fingers and too many compliments. Orson barely said a word. Afterward, I retreated to my guest room and sat in the armchair by the window, pretending to read. The house had quieted down, and somewhere upstairs a door creaked open. Their voices came in waves, muffled at first, then sharper as the argument rose. I held my breath. "She doesn't have long," Gabrielle whispered harshly. 5 years, 10 if she's lucky. This is our chance." Silence. Then Orson's voice. "I don't know. It feels wrong. But it isn't. Think of the money. What she leaves behind could save us. That inheritance could get us out of debt. We'd have a clean slate." "She hasn't even mentioned the money yet." "She will. You'll convince her, just like we planned." I sat frozen in my chair. My breath caught in my throat. My heart pounded. I had wanted to believe that Orson still saw me as his mother, as the woman who had raised him alone after his father died, who had worked 2 jobs so he could go to college, who had held his fevered body through pneumonia and sobbed in gratitude when the doctor finally said he'd be all right. But now, I realized I had become something else entirely. An asset. A calculation in someone else's plan. I gripped the handle of the suitcase under my bed. It felt heavier now, not just from the weight of the money, but from what it represented. I had brought it with the intention of sharing it, of giving Orson and Gabrielle a better life, of easing their burden, and they had turned it into a reason to get rid of me. The betrayal hit harder than I'd expected. I had always feared growing old, losing relevance, becoming a burden. But I never imagined I'd be seen as disposable by the person I loved most. I couldn't stay. I packed quickly and quietly. Just a few essentials. My documents, my phone. The suitcase, of course. I didn't bother writing a note. I didn't trust myself not to cry on the page. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air was damp, and the streets shimmered with reflected light. I hailed a cab and gave the driver the address of the bus station. "Rough night?" he asked as we pulled away. "You could say that." I tried to smile, but my lips wouldn't move. He glanced at me through the rearview mirror. "My grandmother always said, the night is darkest just before the dawn." "She sounds like a wise woman," I replied softly. I hope she was right. He didn't say anything after that, just drove. The city lights passed like ghosts, flickering past the window in pale yellow halos. The streets were nearly empty. It felt like I was slipping through the cracks of the world, unseen, forgotten. At the station, I paid him and left a generous tip. He helped me with my suitcase, and for a moment, I hesitated. Just a few hours ago, I had a home, a family. Now I had a packed bag and nowhere to go. But I had an idea. South Bethany. That was where the Golden Years nursing home was, where I had planned to return eventually. But I couldn't go there now. It would be the first place Orson looked. Still, there was someone in South Bethany who might help me. Someone who had never asked for anything, never judged, never turned her back. Lynette, a college friend, a widow, a woman with a warm kitchen and a sharper intuition than most doctors. She used to visit me with lemon cookies and gossip, saying, "When you've had enough of that gilded cage, come stay with me. I've got a spare room and no schedule." I pulled out my phone. "I'll be in South Bethany by 8 a.m. Need your help. Can you meet me at the station?" The response came almost instantly. "Yes. Are you okay?" "Not really. I'll explain when we meet. I'll be there. Don't worry." I let the phone fall into my lap and gripped the suitcase tighter. I was 75 years old, sitting in a near-empty bus terminal at midnight, fleeing from the people I once trusted most. Somewhere in the corner, a janitor dragged a mop across the floor, removing the last traces of someone else's day. I was scared, but I wasn't powerless. I had choices to make. And for the first time in a long time, I was choosing for myself. The bus left at 4:30 a.m. I boarded with only a few other passengers. A college student nodding off with headphones on, an elderly couple sharing a blanket, and a man in a threadbare jacket snoring softly by the window. I chose a seat at the very back and placed my suitcase next to me, covering it with my jacket like a protective parent. As the engine rumbled to life and the station slipped behind us, I felt a strange sense of relief. Each mile that passed between me and Orson's house felt like a thread being untangled, a burden falling away. I rested my forehead against the cool glass of the window. The city faded into dark fields and silent suburbs. The horizon began to glow faintly, a bruised purple edge softening into light. The world was waking up, and so was I. Memories crept in with the rhythm of the wheels on the highway. I remembered Orson as a child, his small hand curled around mine, his laughter echoing in the kitchen as he chased our old golden retriever across the floor. I remembered the little scar on his chin from falling off his bike and how he cried in my arms, not from pain, but from fear. Back then, I was everything to him, his home, his safety, his whole world. When he met Gabrielle, I was genuinely happy for him. She was spirited, ambitious, confident, everything my quiet, hesitant son wasn't. I thought she would lift him up, fill in the parts he lacked. And for a time, I believed she had. But slowly, things changed. Orson stopped calling just to say hello. His visits became shorter, his hugs more distant. He started telling me less about his life, speaking in generalities like someone keeping a secret. I once dropped by their house unannounced, and Gabrielle answered the door with a tight smile. She said they were very busy. I heard Orson laughing in the background, then silence, followed by her whispering something and closing the door on me with practiced politeness. Thanksgiving and Christmas became more like formalities. They invited me, yes, but only because not doing so would look bad. I sat at their table and felt like a relic they were dusting off for the occasion. When I decided to sell my house and move to the Golden Years retirement home, Orson didn't protest. He even offered to let me live with them, but the offer was lukewarm, obligatory. Gabrielle had smiled too brightly when I declined. "You'll be happier among your peers," she had said. Now I knew what she meant. You'll be out of the way. The bus made a brief stop at a roadside diner. A few passengers stepped off to stretch their legs or buy coffee. I stayed in my seat, unwilling to leave the suitcase unattended. I pulled out a bottle of water and sipped it slowly, trying to calm the ache behind my eyes. My phone buzzed again. Orson. Another missed call. He'd discovered my absence by now, probably panicking, probably still believing he could talk his way out of this, that he could say just the right combination of words and make me forget what I'd heard. But I hadn't forgotten, and I wouldn't. I didn't answer. The bus rolled on and the darkness began to lift. Fields turned gold in the early light. Trees shimmered with dew. The world looked beautiful and quiet and for once, entirely mine. I wasn't going back to Golden Years yet. That would be the first place Orson checked. I needed somewhere safe, somewhere I could think clearly without fear of him knocking on my door. That's when I thought of Lynette again. She lived on the outskirts of South Bethany in a cozy little cottage surrounded by flowers. She had been my friend since college, steady, warm, wise. After her husband died, she kept her house open, always ready for company. She used to visit me at Golden Years with baked goods and say, "If you ever get tired of that place, come stay with me. We don't have bingo nights, but we've got peace and quiet." She wasn't family by blood. She was family by choice. As the sun broke fully over the hills and the bus pulled into South Bethany's station, I spotted her immediately. Lynette stood by the entrance, tall and solid in her linen dress and knit cardigan, her gray hair tied back in a bun. When she saw me, she waved and hurried over. "Bree," she said, wrapping her arms around me, "you look like you've walked through a storm." "I have," I replied, my voice breaking. "Thank you for coming. Don't be silly." She took the suitcase from my hand. "Let's get you home." Her old Volvo smelled of lavender and shortbread. As we drove through the quiet morning streets, I let out a long breath I didn't know I was holding. "Your son called me," Lynette said gently. "About an hour ago." He sounded worried. Asked if I'd seen you. I stiffened. "What did you tell him?" "That I hadn't seen you since I visited Golden Years last Tuesday." "Which is true." She looked at me, her voice soft but direct. "But judging by the fact that you're here with a suitcase at 6 in the morning, something serious happened." "It did," I said quietly. "Whatever it is," she said, squeezing my hand, "you don't have to go through it alone." When we pulled into her driveway, the garden was already waking up, blossoms opening to the sun, bees beginning their morning work. Her house was small and peaceful, the kind of place that felt like safety. "Welcome," she said, opening the door. "This house is yours for as long as you need." I stepped inside and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Home. Lynette's guest room was small but warm. The pale yellow walls caught the morning light just right, and the bed was dressed in a quilt stitched with tulips and vines. I slept for 12 straight hours the first night, waking up only to the scent of fresh bread and Lynette's quiet humming from the kitchen. She didn't press me for answers. Not at first. She simply brewed tea, made breakfast, and gave me silence. It wasn't until the third afternoon, sitting at her little patio table with a view of the blooming garden, that I finally spoke. "I overheard them," I said. "Gabrielle and Orson." Lynette stopped mid-pour and looked at me, waiting. "They were talking about putting me in a state-run nursing home," I continued, "and using Alice's inheritance to pay off their debts. Gabrielle said I only had 5, maybe 10 years left, that the money would do more good for them than for me." Lynette put the teapot down and reached for my hand, her expression unreadable. "What hurt the most," I whispered, "was hearing Orson agree." The words cracked something open in me. I found myself telling her everything. How I had planned to give Orson a share of the money. How I'd wanted to help him and Gabrielle get back on their feet. How I'd worked my whole life to give him a future, only to become just another obstacle to his comfort. Lynette listened without interrupting, her fingers lightly gripping mine. "They were going to throw me away," I said, "after everything." "That's monstrous," she said at last, her voice low. "And Gabrielle, she always gave me the wrong feeling." "But Orson went along with it," I said. "That's what I can't understand. My son." "Some people," she said gently, "get worn down by others, by guilt, pressure, desperation. Maybe he wasn't always like this. Maybe Gabrielle dragged him down and he didn't fight back." I wanted to defend him, to believe that. But the bitterness was too deep. I had saved him when he was sick, worked myself to the bone to raise him after Rex died, and now he was willing to abandon me for a financial shortcut. Lynette's eyes narrowed. "He's been calling me every day since you left. He even called the police to file a missing person report." I blinked. "What? Eddie Britt, remember her? From your old school? She dropped off a fake note at Golden Years this morning, pretending it was from you. Said you were taking a short vacation and not to worry." My jaw dropped. "She what?" "It's in your handwriting, or close enough," Lynette smirked. "You're fine. You did go on a vacation, and you'll call when you're ready. So technically, it's not a lie." I didn't know whether to laugh or be horrified. God, I've missed you. Later that week, Lynette called 2 more friends, Susan Meyer, an eccentric Golden Years neighbor, and Eddie Britt, the former English teacher with a legal brain and a sharp tongue. They arrived armed with advice, baked goods, and a fierce sense of justice. "You should sue him," Eddie declared. "Financial abuse of an elder is a crime." "I'm not looking for revenge," I said, rubbing my temples. "I just want peace." "Then we need a plan," Susan said briskly. "Someplace better than Golden Years, something private and secure. I know a place, Seaside Gardens. Beautiful ocean view, independent living, full care if needed. Expensive, but it's worth it." "It sounds like a dream," I murmured. "You have the money," Eddie pointed out. "Time to spend it on yourself." I hesitated. All my life I had saved, sacrificed, worried about what came next. Could I really use Alice's inheritance to start over? Lynette looked at me with gentle firmness. "You can't undo what's happened, but you can choose what happens next." That night, we started planning. By the end of the week, the plan was in motion. I would move to Seaside Gardens under my own name, pay a full year in advance, and split the rest of the inheritance, half in a new bank account, half in emergency cash hidden in a safe deposit box. For the first time in decades, my life was mine. Not Orson's, not Gabrielle's, mine. The morning I moved into Seaside Gardens, the sky was a perfect shade of blue, crisp, clear, and full of promise. The elegant 3-story building sat just beyond a gently sloping park, its wide windows catching the sunlight like glass sails. It was nothing like the Golden Years. This place had dignity, privacy, and care wrapped in quiet luxury. Victoria Bowen, the facility's receptionist, welcomed me with a practiced smile and impeccable grace. "We're not just a care home," she said as she handed me the key to my suite. "We're a community, and we're honored to have you here, Miss Hodge." I stood in my new room, light streaming in through the bay window that faced the ocean, and allowed myself a moment to breathe. It was done. I was safe. That afternoon, we returned to Lynette's cottage to find Eddie and Susan already waiting for us with news. "He's in town," Eddie said. "Orson, he's been asking around. He was at Golden Years earlier," Susan added. "Demanded to know where you were. When they told him you'd left on your own, he went to the police." My stomach twisted. And, They told him an adult of sound mind has every right to leave and not tell anyone, Eddie said, her smirk unmistakable. And then he got the note. I stared at her. The one you forged? Eddie gave a small shrug. Well, you are on vacation, aren't you? I didn't know whether to scold her or thank her. In the end, I did neither. Instead, I picked up the phone and called Orson. He answered on the first ring. Mom, he sounded breathless. Oh my God, where are you? I've been out of my mind. I'm safe, I said, voice calm but firm. And I know, Orson. I heard everything. There was a pause. A long one. Then, what do you mean? I heard you and Gabrielle talking about putting me in a state home, about how long I had left, about using Alice's money. The silence on the other end was suffocating. I can explain, he started, but I cut him off. No need. I know what I heard. That's why I left. It's not what it sounded like, he said quickly. Gabby, she was just upset. We'd just gotten notice from the bank. We're about to lose the house. She said awful things she didn't mean. I was just trying to calm her down. You said, okay. My voice was steady. You promised her you'd convince me. He didn't respond. I sighed. I don't trust you anymore, Orson, but I'm willing to talk. In person. In public. We agreed to meet in 2 days at a waterfront cafe I liked, where I knew he couldn't corner me. I asked Lynette and Eddie to come with me. They agreed immediately. Orson arrived early. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, pale, stubbled, with the anxious energy of a man who knew he had something to lose. Mom, he said, trying to hug me. I stepped back. Let's sit. He noticed Lynette and Edie and frowned. Can we talk alone? No, I said flatly. They're here because I need them. He took the seat across from me, folding his hands like a child preparing to be scolded. I need you to understand, he began. We were desperate. Gabrielle's business failed. We're drowning in debt. That's why she said those things. What about you? I asked. Did you say things you didn't mean? He didn't answer at first. Then quietly, I was weak. I thought maybe, if I went along with her, we could just ask for help. I would never have actually sent you away. How convenient. Edie said, sipping her coffee. Mom, I love you, Orson said. You're my mother. I made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting a birthday, I said. This was betrayal. I told him I had moved to a new care facility, one where I was safe and independent. I told him I wouldn't be giving him any money. Not now. Not later. He flinched at that, and for the first time I saw the truth hit him. Was it Aunt Alice's money? He asked. Is that where? How much? That's none of your business. Lynette snapped. I looked at him. You didn't even know she died. He said nothing. I'm not cutting you out of my life, Orson, I added after a long pause. But there are conditions. No money. No Gabrielle. If you want to be part of my life again, you'll have to prove I can trust you. He nodded. Slowly. Maybe even sincerely. When it was time to go, he reached for a hug again. This time, I allowed it, a brief, stiff embrace between people who used to know each other. The following weeks brought a strange calm, a period of quiet recovery and reflection. Seaside Gardens proved to be more than just a pretty facility. It was a true refuge, a place where people saw me not as someone to be managed or pitied, but as a full person with stories, laughter, grief, and spirit. My apartment overlooked the sea. Morning light would pour into the living room, bathing the bookshelves and armchair in warmth. Some mornings I cooked in my small kitchen, preparing tea or eggs just for myself, without anyone telling me I was too old to manage. Other days, I joined the residents in the cheerful dining hall, where everyone greeted each other like neighbors on the same winding road. I met Carlos, a retired literature professor who ran the weekly book club and insisted everyone read aloud at least one paragraph. We all still have voices worth hearing, he liked to say. He was right. Then there was Mary, who had once been married to an admiral. She spoke of decades spent abroad, Tokyo, Marrakesh, Helsinki, with a wistful tone and a twinkle in her eye. After a while, home becomes wherever your suitcase lands, she told me one afternoon. Tom, a former chef from New Orleans, sometimes led cooking classes for the residents. He made gumbo, paella, and once even tried to teach us how to make fresh pasta, though we mostly ended up in fits of laughter covered in flour. Lynette, Susan, and Eddie remained constants in my life. They visited weekly, bringing wine and stories, or just silence when I needed it. The four of us often sat on my terrace during sunset, watching the waves melt into the horizon. It was during one of these peaceful evenings that Susan dropped her surprise. What if we went on a trip? She asked, swirling the last of her wine in the glass. A trip? I blinked. Where? To Europe, she said, eyes gleaming. I've always dreamed of seeing Paris, Rome, Barcelona, and why not now? Eddie gave her a skeptical look. We're not exactly backpacking age, but we don't need to backpack, Lynette chimed in, excited. We could rent places online, travel at our own pace, no rush tours, just us. I felt a strange flutter in my chest. Hope? Excitement? I remember, I began, voice trailing off. Rex and I used to talk about going to Italy after he retired, Venice, Florence, Tuscany, but then he got sick and we never went. Then you should go now, Lynette said gently. We all should. We spent the rest of that evening planning like schoolgirls, pulling out maps, searching for photos on our phones, listing the cities we wanted to see. For the first time in years, I felt the spark of anticipation. It wasn't just about escape. It was about reclaiming joy. Later that night, sitting alone on the terrace with a cup of chamomile tea, my phone buzzed. Orson. A part of me wanted to let it ring out. But I answered, Mom? His voice sounded tired, hollow. I was hoping you'd pick up. I straightened in my chair. What's wrong, Orson? Gabrielle and I broke up, he said after a pause. She left, took what was left of our savings, and ran off with her yoga instructor. He gave a weak laugh that held no humor. I'm a mess. I don't know what to do. I said nothing. I'm not calling to ask for money, he added quickly. I mean, I do need it, but that's not why I'm calling. I was wondering if you could help me look for a place in South Bethany, something small. I thought maybe I could move closer, start fresh. I closed my eyes, torn. Was this sincerity or just another play? I understand if you say no, he said. I need someone in my life who believes I can do better. I don't need a check, just a chance. I looked out at the dark sea. Call me in a week, I said quietly. Right now I'm busy planning a trip. There was a beat. A trip? To Europe? I said, a smile tugging at my lips. With my friends. We want to see the world while we still can. He exhaled, sounding surprised. Maybe even happy. That's wonderful, Mom. You deserve it. After we hung up, I sat in silence, listening to the ocean. My world had shifted again, but this time it felt right. I didn't know yet whether Orson had truly changed. I didn't know what his future would look like. But I knew what mine did. For the first time in a long time, it was mine alone. 3 months later, we were standing in the terminal at JFK Airport, passports in hand, wide-eyed like teenagers about to skip school for the first time. None of us had traveled internationally in decades, some never at all. But there we were, 4 women, all over 70, laughing louder than we probably should, dressed in matching neck pillows and compression socks. We flew into Paris first. As our plane descended, the sight of the Eiffel Tower piercing the early morning mist made me catch my breath. I grabbed Lynette's hand. We're really doing this, I whispered. She squeezed my fingers back. Yes, we are. We stayed in a cozy flat on the left bank. The days blurred into long walks along the Seine, flaky croissants eaten on park benches, and hours spent at the Louvre. Adie flirted shamelessly with our tour guide at Versailles, while Susan declared herself in love with French cheese and ready for a long-distance relationship. From Paris, we took the train to Rome. There, I stood in the Colosseum, running my hands along ancient stone, imagining the stories it had witnessed. We drank red wine in Trastevere, tossed coins into the Trevi fountain, and laughed until we cried trying to communicate with our taxi driver, who spoke no English and misunderstood Vatican as vegetarian. Florence was next. The city smelled like leather and espresso. We visited the Uffizi, admired Botticelli's Venus, and watched the sunset from Piazzale Michelangelo, the golden light making the Arno River shimmer like melted gold. Tuscany slowed us down. We rented a farmhouse surrounded by vineyards. Each morning, we sipped coffee on the patio, the hills rolling out in every direction like soft waves. Eddie read poetry. Susan painted watercolors. Lynette baked bread. I wrote in my journal and thought of Rex, remembering how we once dreamed of this. This is for both of us, I whispered one morning, standing barefoot on the dew-covered grass. I'm living it for you too. From there, we moved on. Barcelona, Lisbon, Amsterdam. Every city offered a new rhythm, a new taste, a new breath of life. We weren't just tourists. We were adventurers, survivors. Women who had been underestimated for so long, by society, by families, even by ourselves. Now we were reclaiming everything: space, time, joy, freedom. Sometimes I would catch the others looking at me, and I knew they saw it too. The shift. The woman who had once fled in fear with a suitcase full of inheritance had transformed. I was no longer afraid of being alone. I was no longer ashamed of wanting more from life. I was no longer just someone's mother, someone's widow, someone's responsibility. I was Bree Hodge, a woman living fully, finally. We stayed in Europe for nearly 2 months, extending our trip again and again. We sent postcards to friends back home, posted photos on Lynette's barely functional Facebook page, and promised ourselves this wouldn't be our last adventure. On our final night in Barcelona, we had dinner at a small seaside restaurant. The sea wind tangled our hair, and the sky was streaked with pink and orange. We ordered too many tapas and drank sangria like it was water. To us, Susan toasted, raising her glass. To friendship, said Lynette. To freedom, Eddie added. And me? To second chances, I said. That night, back in our Airbnb, I found a voicemail from Orson. His voice sounded steadier, more grounded. Hi, Mom, I hope you're having the time of your life. I'm looking at an apartment tomorrow. It's small, but it's mine. I just wanted you to know I'm trying. Really trying. And I hope when you come back, we can sit down and talk. No expectations. Just talk. Love you. I listened to it twice. Then I sat in silence for a long time, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazily overhead. Maybe. I didn't know. But maybe. We returned to South Bethany in the quiet heat of late August. The air smelled of salt and sun-warmed asphalt, and the town moved at its usual slow, coastal rhythm. Lynette's garden had exploded with color while we were away, blooms in every hue, as if even the flowers had been waiting to welcome us home. I settled back into my apartment at Seaside Gardens with a strange sense of peace. The trip had changed me in ways I was still unraveling. I walked differently. I laughed more. I had a spark behind my eyes I hadn't seen in years. A week later, Orson called. Mom, he said, voice steady but tentative. I'm here, in South Bethany. I moved last weekend. I'd like to see you, if that's okay. I hesitated for just a moment, then said, all right, Sunday. There's a cafe on 3rd and Maple, 10 a.m. He arrived early. Clean-shaven, hair trimmed, wearing a faded shirt that looked like it had been ironed. When I walked in, he stood awkwardly and offered a shy smile. You look good. Thank you, I said, sitting across from him. There was a pause. Then he said, you look happy. And strong. I am. He nodded. I wanted to say, I know words can't fix everything, but I'm sorry, Mom. Truly. I was weak, and I let fear and pressure get the best of me. Gabrielle, she brought out the worst in me. But I let her. I didn't stand up for you. I didn't protect you. I failed you. The words felt genuine, painful, but real. I looked at him carefully. And what now, Orson? What do you want from me? I don't want your money, he said quickly. I just want time. A chance to rebuild something. Maybe not like it was, but something better. More honest. I sipped my coffee, watching him closely. You'll have to earn it, I said finally. One phone call doesn't fix a decade of distance, but I'm open. Cautiously. His eyes glistened. That's more than I hoped for. Thank you. We didn't hug goodbye. Just a nod, a smile, and the sense of something new, fragile, but possible. Back at Seaside Gardens, I sat out on my balcony that evening, wrapped in a shawl, sipping mint tea. The ocean glimmered under the moonlight. In the distance, waves broke in a slow, steady rhythm, like the beating of a tired but unbroken heart. The last year had stripped me down to the bone, and then built me back up. Not the same, but stronger, clearer. I had mourned my illusions and buried old versions of myself. And what had risen in their place was something fierce and quietly joyful. I thought of Alice and her gift, how it had been meant for a future neither of us could have imagined. I had once seen it as a burden, a source of tension. But now I understood. It had been a key to freedom, to choice, to life on my own terms. Sometimes, late at night, I still dreamed of Orson as a little boy, clutching my hand, smiling up at me with all the trust in the world. I didn't know if we'd ever get back to that. But maybe we could build something new. Grown up. Honest. Flawed, but real. The next morning, I joined Carlos and Mary in the sunroom for the weekly book club. Eddie brought her sarcastic commentary. Susan arrived with a tin of almond cookies from a local bakery. Lynette winked at me as she passed the teapot. These were my people now. My family. Chosen, not inherited. Fierce, wise, and gloriously imperfect. As the conversation turned to our next adventure, a short cruise along the New England coast, I smiled to myself. At 75, I wasn't done. I was just getting started.